Good morning and welcome to BPA's third quarterly business review for fiscal year 2024. I'm Joel Scruggs, Director of Communications. We appreciate you making time for this forum today. Before we get started, I have a few reminders for you. Today's presentation is being recorded and shared via WebEx. The link is available on the event listing for this meeting on the event calendar on bpa.gov. If you happen to experience any trouble with WebEx, you can find the slide deck on our website at bpa.gov/QBR. That's bpa.gov/QBR. You may notice that this WebEx session looks a little different due to a disruptive participant who displayed inappropriate content during the July 31st rate case workshop. We are now using webinar mode in WebEx for our public-facing meetings and workshops. This WebEx mode provides more restricted features and stricter controls for meeting hosts. Regardless of this change, we welcome your questions and engagement. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation, and we will respond to them at the end. To submit a question, click the Q&A button on the upper right-hand side of your screen, input your question, and press send. Your questions will be sent to the BPA host. And as always, if you think of a question after our presentation has ended, you're welcome to email us directly at communications@bpa.gov. We also kindly encourage you to include your company or organization name when you log in to these sessions. Being able to identify meeting participants helps our panelists and other meeting participants. This morning, our Administrator and CEO, John Hairston, will share an overview of BPA's third quarter operational performance, and then our Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Marcus Harris, will summarize the agency's financial performance. John will then close out the main segment of the presentation with a state of the business and strategy update. Following that, I will highlight some upcoming public meetings, workshops, and processes, and then we'll wrap up with any questions that come in. And with that, I'll hand it over to Administrator Hairston. Good morning, John.
Morning, Joel, and welcome everyone. I'm happy to be here with you today to go over BPA's third quarter results. Now let's start with a look at our core operations. I'm thrilled to share that our safety performance was exceptional in the first three quarters. Now, as we finish out the fiscal year and get through these busy summer months, we're especially focused on protecting our workforce and the communities we serve from the potential impacts of heat and wildfires. Turning to power reliability, the forced outage factor is red. Now, this is primarily due to outages at Grand Coulee Dam, specifically the 690 megawatt Unit 19. Long-term outages at John Day and the Dells are also contributors. The Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps of Engineers are working on returning major units to service. The Grand Coulee Unit 19 is expected to return to service by the end of the fourth quarter. The transmission reliability target for average interruption duration on high voltage lines is now yellow, an improvement over last quarter when it was reported red following the severe winter storm we experienced. Now, while we are on track to achieve our target by the end of the fiscal year, I'll caution that we are in the peak of wildfire season and continue to prioritize safety and reliability as we navigate the final months of the year. Now, I'll hand it over to Marcus for details on our financial performance.
All right, thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here with you today. So we're forecasting green on most of our KPIs at this point. Agency net revenue remains below target, but it has improved modestly since the second quarter forecast. And our long-term debt to asset goal is a cautionary yellow due to the large capital expansion that we've planned in the integrated program review. And I'll go into the KPI details on the following slides. But overall, the bottom line really at Q3 is that we'll likely beat our IPR operating expense target, which is good, but we'll miss our overall agency net revenue target. Even though our net revenue forecast has improved by about $59 million from Q2, we are still feeling the financial impacts of the record low hydro generation, high market prices, and the near $300 million loss from the January cold snap. Looking at days cash on hand, it's our primary liquidity metric, it's still on target, and there is a near 0% modeled probability for any crack, cost recovery adjustment clause, or surcharge for either business unit. And that's because we've taken prudent measures in managing liquidity over many years, and this has allowed us to absorb a tough year like this without having to trigger a crack or surcharge and raise rates. Our ability to do this aligns directly with our financial plan strategy to provide low and stable rates over the long term, even during challenging market and hydrological conditions. Also important to mention, the United States recently reached an agreement in principle to modernize the Columbia River Treaty with Canada. Now, while there is still a lot of work to do before the modernized treaty can be entered into force, one key element for Bonneville is the lowering of the energy and capacity that BPA delivers to Canada for their share of downstream power benefits. This has already begun effective August 1st, and we expect that the additional capacity and energy will provide considerable financial benefit. This benefit will be showing up as soon as the end of this fiscal year and in future fiscal years. Agency capital expenditures are on track to meet the end of year target, and capital execution is continuing at a strong pace. Transmission's capital execution is strong this year, nearly doubling expenditures from previous years. For the Fed Hydro Capital Program, roughly 60% of that program is forecast capital expenditures associated with major capital projects, which I expect will drive improved execution rates. On the debt to asset KPI, there are two parts, a short-term and long-term goal. We're on track to achieve the short-term goal to be at or below 81% at the end of the fiscal year, but the longer-term target of achieving a 60% debt to asset ratio by 2040 is off track. Power services is still expected to be below 60% by 2040, but transmission is not, due to the large planned transmission capital expansion for evolving grid and interconnection activities. And as a result, the agency is off track of the 2040 goal as well. We'll continue to monitor and report on this metric, and we'll factor in reserve distribution clause decisions, future revenue financing, and capital execution as we assess if any corrective measures are needed in the future. Moving to slide 8, the agency's net revenue KPI target is $95 million, and that's the blue bar on the far left. Red means the driver reduces the forecast relative to the KPI target, while green means the driver increases the forecast. So red is bad, green is good. Moving to the next bar, operating revenues are forecast to be $485 million higher than target. And this is largely because of higher than expected trading for sales due to higher prices throughout the year. Additionally, we're seeing increased 4H10C Treasury credits resulting from increased replacement power purchases at higher market prices. Transmission is also contributing to the better than expected revenues because of favorable market prices. On the next bar, IPR expense, we estimate that they will be $34 million less than the target due to lower renewable and conservation energy purchases, lower personnel costs from having fewer corporate staff on board than planned, and lower fish and wildlife program expenses and conservation purchases. Moving on to the next bar, we expect non-IPR expenses to come in $836 million higher than target, and this is predominantly due to higher than expected power purchases. Combining these drivers together results in our third quarter agency net revenue forecast of negative $221 million, which is $316 million below the target. Turning to power on slide 9, the blue bar on the far left is Power's KPI target of $100 million. And moving to the second bar, Power's operating revenues are $415 million above target, driven by higher trading for sales and 4H10C credits. Both increases are driven by higher prices. The slice true-up is forecast to be a credit of $18.6 million, driven by higher than expected 4H10C credits. Moving to the third bar, IPR expenses are $31 million below the target, mainly due to lower renewable and conservation energy purchases and lower corporate staffing and fish and wildlife program costs. In the fourth bar, non-IPR expenses are $776 million above the KPI target due to increased power purchase expenses. Throughout the year, we faced dry conditions, high market prices, and low water availability for power generation. Higher power purchase expenses more than offset increased secondary sales, and this is the main reason we expect net secondary sales to underperform this year. Driven by higher non-IPR power purchase expenses, Power's third quarter net revenue forecast is negative $229 million, which is $329 million below the KPI target. Moving to transmission on slide 10, starting with the blue bar on the left, transmission's KPI target is negative $4 million. Looking at the second bar, which is operating revenues, these are $37 million above the KPI target, driven mainly by higher EIM-related ancillary revenues. We're also seeing increased Southern Intertie short-term revenues driven by favorable market prices, which lead to increased wheeling revenues. Moving to the third bar, transmission IPR expenses are forecast to be $3 million below target. This is mostly driven by reduced personnel costs because of lower staffing levels than planned. The fourth bar, non-IPR expenses are forecast to be $32 million above the KPI target, largely due to EIM entity scheduling coordinator settlement charges. Looking at the bar on the far right, in total, transmission's higher expected operating revenues and lower expected IPR expenses offset the increased cost pressure in non-IPR expenses. This results in end-of-year transmission net revenue of $4 million, which is $8 million above the KPI target. Now turn to financial reserves on slide 11. So agency financial reserves for risk are forecast to be $732 million at the end of the fiscal year. This is a decrease of $555 million from the prior year, but relative to the second quarter forecast, it's an increase of $12 million. From the business line perspective, we're forecasting Power to end the year with $470 million in reserves for risk. It's a decrease of $453 million from the prior year. But of this, $285 million was a planned reduction as part of the Reserve Distribution Clause, or RDC. Transmission is forecast to end the year with $262 million, a decrease of $100 million from the prior year, and of this, $130 million was planned as part of the RDC. Looking at days cash on hand, which is a key performance indicator associated with the financial plan, the agency is forecast to end the year at 100 days, Power at 92 days, and transmission at 120 days cash. And finally, we've modeled the reserve forecast uncertainty for the remainder of the year. Because of our strong starting liquidity position and liquidity preservation tools, there's less than a 1% modeled probability for a crack for either business unit. For Power, there's less than a 1% modeled probability of an RDC as well, with an expected value of $1 million. For transmission, there's a 67% modeled probability of an RDC with an expected value of $29 million. The flexible debt payments as a result of last year's RDC for both Power and transmission are built into this third quarter forecast. Transmission has had a strong financial year, so I fully expect we will make the transmission flexible debt payment. For Power, we'll continue to monitor their reserve position through late August and early September and determine at that time if the flexible debt payment will be made. So turning to our capital program on slide 12, you can see the agency is exceeding its midpoint execution targets overall due to high transmission and Fed hydro execution. The blue bar on the far left is the KPI midpoint target of $920 million for capital expenditures. There was a $102 million budget increase approved for transmission in the last quarter, increasing the overall agency target midpoint from $818 million to the current $920 million. The upper and lower dashed gray lines are the target execution range for our total direct capital investments. The blue bar on the far left represents agency direct capital forecast of $962 million for the third quarter, which is within the target range. Turning to transmission, which is the first green bar, transmission is $31 million above the midpoint target. This increase is driven by strong execution on several large projects, including Midway Ash, south of Tri-Cities, and McNary-Patterson Tap, among others. Moving to Fed Hydro, the forecast is $19 million above target due to work ramping up on larger projects such as the Chief Joe Dam generator windings and multiple projects at Grand Coulee Dam. Turning to Environment, Fish, and Wildlife, the forecast is below the midpoint target by $4 million due to lower forecast spending for hatchery projects and normal contract adjustments. Finally, Enterprise Services, which includes the facilities, fleet, IT, and security asset categories, is $4 million below the midpoint target. Almost all of this decrease is due to a $3 million reduction in IT's transmission-specific forecast to account for the cancellation of the Transmission Circuit Information System project, which will be reset with a different solution. And last from me, just a few other financial updates. So we continue to be rated at AA1 with Moody's, AA with Fitch, and AA- with Standard & Poor's. This means we consistently maintain high investment grade credit ratings in alignment with our financial plan goals. I'm also pleased to report that our strong ratings were affirmed with no changes in April and May ahead of 3 non-federal bond pricings that total $916 million in the last quarter. Out of the $916 million, BPA and Energy Northwest issued $840 million of tax-exempt debt over 2 separate pricings last quarter. Our strong credit ratings and heavy emphasis on investor outreach helped us achieve very competitive rates in both pricings, despite some pretty significant market headwinds. Strong demand for our bonds allowed us to tighten spreads, essentially lowering the interest rate by as much as 6 basis points on some maturities. It saved a significant amount of money on future interest costs. And in June, our last pricing, BPA and the Port of Morrow were in the market for a $76 million taxable bond to pay off a line of credit on transmission facilities. This is part of our lease purchase financing program. This was BPA's first ever green bond issuance and was very, very successful also during a challenging market. So this concludes the financial report for the quarter. Thanks everyone for your time. I'll turn it back to John.
All right, thank you, Marcus, for walking us through those results. So let's turn to an update on some of our strategic initiatives. Now, we continue to work behind the scenes to ensure that we have the right work environment, culture, and workforce capabilities to deliver on our mission and achieve all of our other commitments. This work might not always be visible to you, but the outcomes will. Among our recruitment and outreach activities, we have strengthened our student program and are tapping this talent pool to support strategy implementation. We see this as an investment in the future as many interns go on to become permanent employees. We also continue targeted recruitment to help fill mission-critical positions that are notoriously hard to fill across our industry. We're also prioritizing outreach among women and minorities to help us advance our diversity goals, which goes hand in hand with inclusivity to enhance creativity, innovation, and results in the workplace. Now, I'm happy to report that we are trending in the right direction and on track for yet another record hiring year. Also, after years of negotiations, I'm happy to be able to discuss the progress made between the U.S. and Canada to modernize the Columbia River Treaty. Last month, we announced an agreement in principle on key elements of a modern treaty that will bring significant value to both countries and to communities across the Columbia River Basin. BPA advised and supported the State Department in the goal of retaining reliable, economical, carbon-free hydropower that benefits the Northwest economy, BPA's utility customers, and regional electric ratepayers. From BPA's perspective, these arrangements will bring power and economic benefits to the region, along with operational predictability that will support the generation and delivery of clean hydropower from the FCRPS. A major objective for BPA was to rebalance the power benefits we share with Canada through what's known as the Canadian entitlement. Treaty modernization will result in a substantial reduction from the current amounts of energy and capacity BPA returns to Canada through the Canadian entitlement. This relief on the Canadian entitlement has already begun, even as the countries continue to complete the necessary steps to enter the modernized treaty into force. Beginning in August, the Canadian entitlement is about 60% of what it was previously. We are already benefiting from this change, which was timely given the high temperatures and demand for power we're seeing across the grid. As we head into the BP26 rate case, the Canadian entitlement changes will increase the amount of energy available for Tier 1 rates, reducing customers' exposure to higher Tier 2 costs. But this is just the beginning. By 2033, the entitlement will decrease to less than 50% of the prior amount. To put this in more concrete terms, by 2033, the U.S. will be retaining almost 600 more megawatts of capacity compared to today, and about 230 more average megawatts of energy. In addition to these power benefits, we negotiated a change to the transmission rights used to deliver the Canadian entitlement. Those transmission rights have historically been held by BPA, but going forward will be assigned to an entity designated by Canada. This will give Canada more flexibility while alleviating BPA of the transmission costs and contributing to our financial strength. The agreement in principle also sets a firm foundation for pursuing potential expansion of BPA's transmission system to increase renewable energy transfers between the U.S. and Canada as envisioned by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We will be working with our partners to the north to begin studying upgrades to the eastern BC to U.S. intertie connection. Another noteworthy aspect of the agreement in principle is its sound framework for the continuation of BPA's environmental stewardship responsibilities. As we've done for the past 30 years, we will continue to work with Canada to provide flow augmentation for anadromous fish on the U.S. side, but now on a more certain and long-term basis. We'll also be working with the Columbia Basin tribes, other U.S. government agencies and indigenous nations, and Canada to determine how treaty operations can continue to support ecosystem needs. We believe there are real opportunities to build on the good progress we've been making in ecosystem protection and restoration. Now, reaching an agreement in principle for the modernizing of the treaty represents a significant milestone in our negotiations with Canada, but it is not the end of the negotiations process, and there is still a lot of work to be done before the modernized treaty can be entered into force. Specific treaty text and amendments will still need to be developed, and both countries still have to go through their respective domestic processes for formal ratification. Now, that said, reaching an agreement in principle is a major step forward, and I look forward to keeping you updated as the two nations continue to make progress on treaty language. Bonneville remains on track to offer new contracts with customers in late 2025. Power deliveries under those contracts will begin in October of 2028. We are shifting gears into the contract development phase while simultaneously wrapping up some policy implementation details. We recently concluded an intensive sprint intended to determine whether BPA could offer the sliced block product for a provider of choice contract period and to finalize the foundational product design elements. For the near term, 3 sliced block customers have requested a one-time option to switch their current contracts from the sliced block product to load following for the BP26 rate period. The comment period for this product switch request ended on July 31st. We received 3 comments, which were all supportive of the request. We will consider the input that we received in our determination, which we intend to communicate next week. In a parallel effort, we recently issued the draft public rate design methodology. It is going through a staged public comment review process. A PRDM is replacing the tiered rates methodology, which expires September 2028. Although the TRM provides a solid framework for the PRDM, and there seems to be alignment around the draft. The public rate design methodology is a standalone document that works in concert with our power sales contracts and each rate setting process starting with the BP29 rate period. The goal is to produce a methodology that customers can evaluate in tandem with BPA's product offering in advance of signing power sales contracts. Our draft methodology will serve as our initial proposal, which will be formally vetted in a 7I hearing conducted in parallel with the BP26 rate process. In April, BPA released a staff recommendation on BPA's day-ahead markets participation. Since then, key factors for Bonneville's decision have continued to develop. This includes other regional utilities that have declared their choice of market platform. These decisions affect the footprint of the two market alternatives and the relative net economic benefits of each. Although during this time, the West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative, led by several Western state utility regulators and a number of regional stakeholders, produced its Step 1 recommendations for improving the Cal ISO's market governance through measures that likely will not require California legislation, which in fact just this week received a unanimous affirmation vote from the Cal ISO Joint Board. The Pathways participants continue to work on additional options that may be considered next year by the California legislature. Because of these developments and ongoing uncertainties with the design of both the Southwest Power Pools Markets Plus initiatives and the California Independent System Operators Extended Day-Ahead Market Initiative, I am currently evaluating Bonneville's day-ahead markets decision timeline. Bonneville is balancing the need for a deliberate, transparent process with the urgency created by the decisions of our neighbors. As I've said from the outset, BPA seeks to participate in a market that has a durable, effective, and independent governance structure which provides fair representation to all market participants and stakeholders. I fully appreciate the magnitude of such a decision, and you have my commitment to continuing our deliberate, transparent process with the aim of making a decision that is right for our customers in the region. In June, we transitioned to our new transmission tariff and new large generator interconnection processes and requirements that resulted from the TC25 settlement agreement in January. The new tariff uses a first-ready, first-served cluster study approach to help us connect new generators onto the grid more efficiently. The new process requires proof of commercial readiness and site control requirements to participate in the study process. Now we are focused on implementing the transition process, including the first generator interconnection cluster study. We opened a transition request window on June 30th, and customers with eligible requests have until September 28th to submit a transition request to have their interconnection request studied in the transition cluster study. Now, of those in the queue, 302 requests totaling more than 150 gigawatts are eligible to participate in the transition cluster study. The transition cluster study will begin on January 27th of 2025. As you can probably guess from the size of the queue, this reform effort is critical to our 2024 to 2028 strategy as we advance transmission investments and find innovative solutions to integrate resources. Fire danger remains high in the Pacific Northwest, which means teams across BPA are busy monitoring and responding to the conditions across our service territory. In late July, a National Weather Service red flag warning and high winds in Harney County, Oregon, triggered the use of our Public Safety Power Shutoff, or PSPS, to reduce the risk of ignition. Now, this action interrupted service for some of Harney County Electric Co-op's customers for several hours, but we were able to restore service sooner than expected. But we've committed to continue refining our PSPS process and providing as much advance notice as possible while recognizing the extremely dynamic nature of conditions leading up to such an event. Despite the wildfires and heat we felt across the region, the federal power and transmission systems have performed remarkably well. With ample warning from our streamflow and weather forecasters, power and transmission were able to prepare and position the federal hydropower and transmission system to be able to address the extended high temperatures in early July. On July 9th, we reached a record peak summer load of 9,365 megawatts. The previous record of 9,179 megawatts was set the previous day, July 8th, with the record before that coming in August of 2023 at 9,048 megawatts. On the power side, we were able to move outages and other maintenance to maximize our generation capacity. We also coordinated with Energy Northwest to ensure access to Columbia Generating Station during this period. Upstream releases for temperature control from Dvorak Dam coincided with the timing of the heat wave, resulting in additional generation on the Lower Snake and Lower Columbia projects. While hydrologic constraints limited BPA's daily generation, we were able to import energy during off-peak hours in order to generate more during the peak hours, and this helped the region meet peak loads. Our transmission system also fared well. Despite heavy loading across the Western Interconnection, we were able to postpone outages that could be delayed to avoid unnecessary reductions in capacity, and when issues arose, our employees were quick to restore the system. We're now experiencing the most intense period of the region's wildfire season, and I'm grateful for everything our workforce is doing to implement BPA's wildfire mitigation plan to prevent wildfires and keep communities we serve very safe. Now, I know many of our customers and partners are battling against the same conditions that we are, and I appreciate the ongoing coordination and support as we manage these dangerous conditions, support firefighting efforts, and maintain reliable service, as well as prioritize public safety. Now that concludes my updates, and I'll turn it back over to you, Joel.
Thank you, John and Marcus. Okay, I'm going to quickly share where you can join us in upcoming meetings, workshops, and processes, and highlight an open comment period. Then we'll close out with any questions that you may have. As a reminder, you can find our customer and public meetings and workshops on the event calendar at bpa.gov when you navigate to the Learn and Participate tab. Here are a few highlights from our event calendar. Later today, we're hosting the QBR Technical Workshop. So from 1 to 3 p.m., our finance team will provide additional info on some of the topics discussed today. You can find more information about the QBR Technical Workshop on our QBR webpage at bpa.gov/QBR. Also happening today, there's a BP TC26 customer-led workshop where New Sun and Puget Sound Energy will present withdrawal penalties, tariff change proposals, and revenue requirements. There's another customer-led workshop reserved for August 22nd for power rate topics. As a follow-up from the August 9th BPA-led workshop, please note that we will cancel the August 22nd workshop if we don't receive a request to hold it. The next BPA-led pre-procedural rate case workshop is scheduled for August 27th and 28th. We will be hosting several provider of choice workshops through the fall. As you may recall, BPA released its provider of choice policy and record of decision on March 21st. In April, we began this public process to determine how to implement the policy through provider of choice contracts and other associated rate methodology processes. We're holding the next provider of choice workshop on Monday, August 26th from 1 to 4 p.m. And as you can see, we're holding several more provider of choice workshops in September and October. On September 19th, we will be facilitating another day-ahead market participation workshop as we continue our public review process for evaluating BPA's potential participation in a day-ahead market. And then our corporate offices will be closed on September 2nd in observance of Labor Day, and again on October 14th in observance of Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. All right. There's currently one active public comment period. The BP26 Integrated Program Review comment period has been open for 6 weeks, and it closes tomorrow, Friday, August 16th. The IPR allows interested parties to see all relevant federal Columbia River Power System capital and expense forecasts in the same forum. Topics include transmission, fed hydro, facilities, information technology, energy efficiency, environment, fish and wildlife, and other programs. The IPR process occurs just prior to each rate case and is the public review for the forecasted costs that will be recovered through rates during the following rate period. As a reminder, BP26 will be a 3-year rate period to sync up with new long-term contracts that go into effect in 2028. BPA is seeking input on the materials presented during the June 27th, 28th, and July 1st workshops. As a reminder, you can find comment periods hosted by BPA and submit your comments on the public comment section of our website. Go to bpa.gov/comments and it will take you directly to our comments webpage. That concludes our presentation. We'll now transition over to a brief Q&A session. To ask a question, please submit it through the Q&A field, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. Nothing has come in to this point. We'll give it a moment. Still nothing. Last call. Well, you can always bring your questions to the QBR technical workshop this afternoon, which begins at 1 p.m. And if you think of a question even later, you can always email it to communications@bpa.gov. We will post responses to any questions that we do receive on the QBR webpage in the coming weeks, along with a recording and transcript of today's meeting. Furthermore, if you have a topic that you think warrants further discussion, please email us at communications@bpa.gov, and we will look into the best way of getting that information to you. One other thing, we are seeking your feedback about this forum. We would greatly appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and complete the post-event feedback survey. We want to continue to ensure that this forum is valuable to you, and if there are any enhancements or adjustments that we should consider for future QBRs. We've dropped the survey link into the Q&A box, I think. We're about to, and then we will also email it out to attendees. Okay, to wrap things up, we really appreciate you listening today and engaging with us in this forum and others. Our next quarterly business review will be on Tuesday, November 12th. In the meantime, enjoy the end of summer, the start of the school year, the kickoff to football season, and whatever you're up to, stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to presenting the agency's end of fiscal year performance results in November. Thank you.